Serious. What is the creepiest thing that's happened to you while home alone? Part 2. Please do like, share, and subscribe. One time, this radio we had in our kitchen started blasting the Elvis CD that was inside of it when no one was near it, and the radio hadn't been touched in years. It was creepy too because it was right after my grandpa had died, and my grandma had an Elvis obsession my whole life. I know electronics randomly going off is a semi-common thing, but imagine just hearing Elvis out of nowhere when you're home alone in the dark. LOL, I was like, I was feeding my cats when I heard my significant other call out my name from our kitchen. I had just gotten up, so I thought he had gotten off of work early. Just a side note, I was taught to never respond unless you can see the person. So I went out our room and headed to the kitchen and didn't find him there. I was confused because I was so sure I heard his voice calling out to me. We have the 360 app, and when I looked him up, I saw he was still at work. Still freaked out over that. My mom was in a hospital 50 miles away. I was 19. We were pretty sure this was it. She was going into surgery for an intestinal infection that was likely to kill her. I was home alone. My parents' house is big. It's off the beaten path on a small lagoon. My dad had been staying up at the hospital. That night I went to bed about 1 a.m. I was playing on my laptop. My bedroom was in a separate wing of the house. It can be sealed off with a single locking door. The door was shut but not locked. I've always been scared of the dark, so I had the lights in my wing on. So was the closet light. As I was messing around on GameFAQs, I saw the light in my wing turn off. All of them. The band of light under the door went black. I hopped up in bed and stared at it. My bedroom door was unlocked, and I was debating getting up to lock it when the shut door slammed. As in, it sounded like someone straight up kicked the bottom of the door with all their strength. I remember squeaking in shock. It took me about 6 seconds to be up on both feet with a blade about 4 paces back and just right of the door. I remember thinking if the door opened, I could be on whoever it was almost instantly. I was also silently cursing that there was no light under the door anymore, no way to see the shadow or whoever was out there. Nothing happened. I was fighting off the fear of the situation and stupidly decided that going on offense was all that was left. 19-year-old me was a moron. I didn't have a phone in my room, and my Nokia was in another wing or the house charging. I threw the door open with my knife low and my left hand in a guarded position. There was no one there. I tossed the hallway light switch on. There was no one in my wing. There was no one in the house. The burglar alarm was still on. Confused, I turned on the main house lights and sealed the wing off by locking the door between the main house and my area. I went back to my room and just sat there with my laptop open. My bedroom door now had a slight bow in it. A couple hours passed with me wearily laying in bed. Around 3 a.m. the lights under the door went dark. Now I was terrified. My knife seemed pretty insignificant, and my previous dumb courage had ran out. I scooted my bed, no easy task, against my bedroom door. Grateful the door opened inward, I retreated to my closet and waited for the sun to come up. When the skylight in my room got bright, my courage returned, and I moved the bed and exited the room. The wing door had been unlocked from the other side, which required a key. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs in the main house and realized my dad was home. I felt a little foolish, as obviously he had been responsible for turning the lights off the second time. I led my greeting with, "Oh, so it was you who turned all the lights off at 3. He looked at me and said, "I got home about 10 minutes ago." I have zero clue what happened that night, but it never happened before that night or after. It was definitely scary at the time, and still gives me the willies when I think of it. My parents built the house, and nothing untoward had ever taken place. My bedroom door at my parents' house still has a bow in it to this day. This was almost 20 years ago. Oh, and my mom is still alive, and for that, I'm extremely grateful. I was by myself playing some Minecraft when all of a sudden, as if it were right behind me, I hear a loud bang. About 10 minutes later, I heard an ambulance and saw police lights like 2 houses down from mine. And then the house was for sale, but we had no visits scheduled. It was also 8 p.m., and this man unlocked our door and came in with his family of like 4. Well, I had hid behind the couch and sicked the dog on them. I heard a little kid crying and looked over as they were leaving, but it scared me half to death. When I lived in a tent on a property in a rural Californian Indian reservation, One morning I woke up to the sound of a truck I didn't recognize creeping along the gravel driveway. I zipped open the tent and peeked out to see what was going on. The truck looked skeevy, and since I did not have anything to defend myself with, I just went back inside and zipped up the door. I heard them drive into the field, and then 10 to 20 minutes later, they left. Later that day, I called a friend and told him what happened. He got word from another friend that the dudes in the truck were two armed, thieving tweakers who drove into the field, cut open the neighbor's fence, and stole half of their marijuana crop. Thankfully, the morons got busted quickly because they stopped at the local cafe to get some coffee, and the barista there knew the two derelicts were up to no good and called the police. So I'm 15, home alone, watching a scary movie cause I'm an idiot. I think it was The Ring or something similar. Anyway, the film is suitably freaking me out when suddenly the TV starts going static, then goes back to the film. It happens once, I think, okay, this is creepy. If you've watched The Ring, you'll understand why this is particularly distressing, lol. But I continue sitting there and watching. After a couple more minutes, it happens again, and then it happens a third time, but this time the lights in my house all start flickering. I'm extremely freaked out at this point, thinking something is about to crawl out of my damn TV. So, for some reason, my teenage brain tells me my priority should be to go upstairs and change out of my pajamas. If I'm gonna die, I want to die in style, lol. I run upstairs, shakily change out of my pajamas, and put my shoes on when I realize I'm probably overreacting, imagining things, and I need to chill out. I go back to sit in front of the TV, but decide watching a scary movie alone is messing with me too much, so put it on a different channel. About 1 minute later, the lights start flickering, the TV goes static, and then suddenly the house goes completely dark. Everything just switches off. I go into fight or flight mode and just run the fuck out of my house. My road is completely dark, no lights or anything. I live in London, so this never happens. But I can see some lights in the distance, so I run in that direction like my life depends on it. I got all the way to the local parade of shops, panting and wheezing and almost in tears, when my brain finally kicks in and realizes what's happened. It's a power cut on my road. It's also like 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, and in my rush I've left my keys, purse, and mobile phone at home. Had to reverse call from my grandma from a payphone and get her to bring me the spare keys to my house, lol. Oops. I was in the hospital to care for my grandmother, and the room she was had 2 bedrooms in between of a bathroom just covered with curtains. The other bedroom has no patient, so it was so dark in that area. When I was sleeping on a bench, somebody is poking me that caused my sleep to be interrupted. Until today, I don't know who it was. It can't be my grandmother because she was on dextrose and couldn't get up. I had just moved into my new house for college. It was literally my first night alone in the place, and the rest of my roommates weren't going to arrive until the following morning. Back then, my bed was situated close to my window, and it was open so I could hear everything outside. I heard the sound of someone walking down the sidewalk, then towards my house through the grass. I stuck my head out the window and just barely got a glimpse of the dude's bald head as he was stepping onto the front porch. I could hear him pacing around on the porch, then move to the side of our house. When I could hear him walking in the gap between the house and our neighbors, I rushed downstairs, flipping on all the lights, making as much noise as possible, and carrying my fake tomahawk and dialing 911. I think he bolted as soon as the lights came on, because I didn't see or hear him outside after that. My house had been vacant for quite a while before I moved in, and we had a lot of homeless people in the area at that point. The police think it may have been a homeless man trying to break in for shelter or something, because there were literally no signs of life in the place, at least from ground level. I live way out in the country, far enough where it's miles and miles to the nearest town. My dad had left early that day for work, and I stayed in bed sleeping. A few hours after he left, I heard the front door being unlocked, opened, then closed. I assumed my dad got home. I jump out of bed and yell for him. Nothing. I checked the door thinking he must have left something outside, but the door was still locked. I shrugged it off because I usually hear things like this. I go to take a shower, and right when I get in, I hear voices coming outside the door that are whisper yelling. I yell for them. It stops. I turn off the shower and wrap myself in a towel. I open the door and still no one is there. I get dressed and walk outside. My dad's vehicle is still gone. I walk to my Gram's house that's next door. She's gone as well. I shrug it off because I thought I left my TV on again. I go back to my room to lay down and watch TikTok. After a few minutes of that, I get up and make food. I heard slot machine game music, like mobile app music, start playing from my dad's room. I was so creeped out that I speed walked to my Gram's house and waited for my dad to come home. I wasn't home alone, but the only adult with 4 children, had no phone. At the time, we had just one cell phone and it was at work with my husband. So I'm sitting there and someone starts going around my house, pounding on the windows, literally working their way around, banging on each in succession. And this was past 10 at night. So I got all the kids together in the room with me and got the pistol and set it in my lap. Messaged my mother on Facebook since she had a phone and had her call the police. 20 or 30 minutes later, the cops finally rolled up and came and knocked on my window and yelled in at me, not immediately identifying themselves as police, of course. That could have turned really ugly. Turns out the kids with the people visiting the folks in the other side of the duplex we lived in at the time had randomly decided to fuck with us. We had just gotten new windows put in through the house. I was laying in the living room sofa, which is along a wall of windows, as well as the back door 5 feet away. It's bright outside. I'm alone watching TV when I start to hear a baby crying outside, basically right behind where I'm laying down. We don't have a huge backyard, but it's probably the size of a 7-Eleven. It's private. I literally rolled onto the floor, squirmed my way to the door that was wide open to slam it shut, and ran into my room. Fuck that. I'm not dumb enough to check that shit alone. It was around the time we had a huge scare. We didn't have curtains or blinds yet, and around 3 a.m, there's light knocking on the front door. I'm in my room downstairs, my mom is upstairs. It got both of us alert, and I heard her creep down the stairs, so I tiptoed down the tiny hallway, making sure I'm not in view of any windows. She whispers if I hear it, as it's super faint, and I answer yes. She says stay away from the windows and go back to bed. She was going to call the cops. The next day I go to work and find out by one of my regulars there was a home invasion 2 blocks away from my house around the time we heard the knocking that night. They were armed with guns and they attacked people who didn't even put up a fight. That was fucking scary as hell, man. So, I was home alone and I was getting some food and a drink from the kitchen, making a grilled cheese sandwich, and I went to go sit down at the dining table when I suddenly heard a faint hello behind me. I looked behind me and literally no one was there at all. After that, I just went on with my day. As usual, I was thirsty again, so I went downstairs to get a drink and saw a shadow figure in my house's smoke room. I figured, forget it, I should get some sleep. So I went to sleep. End of that insane day. I also saw a black figure peek out from behind a tree right across from my house. Scared the actual fuck out of me. This is gonna sound ridiculous, but when I was really young, we had just gotten a Wii and we kept it connected to the basement TV. This old, shitty hunk of garbage that buzzed when it was on. I was always uneasy in the basement, and one day when I was home alone, right after getting home from school, I went downstairs and powered the Wii up for a good old-fashioned Twilight Princess session. I got up to go to the bathroom, and from down the hall I heard stuff being clicked on the Wii and got uneasy. I slowly turned the corner and saw the Wii remote halfway across the room with the nunchuck detached and the rubber sleeve nowhere to be found. I bolted upstairs faster than I ever had before and settled on playing alone in the driveway for 3 hours while I waited for my parents to get home from work. I was asleep one night. My bed was just a mattress on the floor. I woke up to what I thought was the scuffling sound of my dog, a Shih Tzu Lhasa Apso mix, scratching against the bottom of my mattress to let me know he needed to be let out, a regular nightly occurrence. As I stirred myself to consciousness, I thought to myself that I must have slept through his initial signals to me, because he really seemed to be going at it, making more of a racket than he usually does. Okay, I'm getting up, I said, pulling myself upright to let him out, and immediately felt his warm, sleeping body lying next to me on the mattress. My heart stopped, my breathing stopped, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and in that exact instant, the scuffling sound ceased. I jumped out of bed and turned the lights on and looked to see what was going on, but nothing seemed out of place. I had a very difficult time going back to sleep that night. My old dog was very food motivated, partly because my fault when he was a puppy, and this ended up being his downfall because he'd steal food all the time. He got into some poisonous gum, but that is beside the fact. A sad story, and I've always felt part to blame. I used to have him stay on the couch downstairs while I edged toward the stairs with the treat and ran up the stairs and hid quickly so he wouldn't know where I was and he'd run around searching. This particular time, I ran into my sister's room and hopped behind her bed near her closet on the floor. He eventually found me, and I toyed with him and rewarded him. I was home alone, and hours later, I couldn't find my phone, so I used Google Online to ring it because I had an Android at the time. My phone was stuffed into the back of my sister's closet on a shoe shelf that was, and when I say this, I swear, physically impossible to have fallen out of my pocket and gotten into. This shelf was about a foot off the floor and deep into the back of the closet and in like a cubby hole. Plus, by the time I had gotten behind my sister's bed, which is multiple feet from the closet, I wasn't even moving that fast. I assumed when I sat on the floor hiding, it fell out of my pocket and something put it on the shelf.